Yes, you heard that right. 94% of the population has mitochondrial dysfunction. And if these are the batteries of our cells, what the hell does that mean for us? Welcome back to another episode of Don't Look Up, where, in fact, we encourage you to look up. What we're doing right now is we're going to break down various topics in science into digestible pieces of information so that you can optimize your health. And today we're going to be talking about something that is an issue in 94% of the population, mitochondrial dysfunction. My name is Boomer Anderson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Smarter Not Harder, parent company of Troscriptions, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of Health Optimization Medicine and Practice. And by the way, I'm a health optimization practitioner. Let me volley it over here.
All right, got it. My name is Dr. Scott Sherr. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Troscriptions, as well as Health Optimization Medicine and Practice. I'm an internal medicine physician. I practice hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I've been in practice for almost 2 decades.
All right, so I want to take you back to the primordial soup and how our initial cells developed.
Yes, Luca.
So most people don't know that that wasn't something that started at the Big Bang. It happened over the course of evolution. So you have this anaerobic organism as well as this oxygen-carrying organism married together in sort of the symbiotic relationship. And why do we call mitochondria our cells' batteries?
This is where we make most of our energy. We have our energy currency in our body is called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. We make about 150 pounds of ATP every single day. That's a huge amount of energy that we need. We're recycling it all the time. But the problem is, as you were mentioning, Boomer, is that 94% of US adults don't make and don't meet their energy demands because they have dysfunction. Now, this dysfunction can happen on many different areas, everything from the food we eat to the processing of that food into electrons, which is what we need. They're called our electron transport chain. And then from there, we make energy, the ATP, but we also make what are called waste products of energy metabolism, carbon dioxide, water, and these other things called free radicals or reactive oxygen species. These are oxygen molecules with free floating electrons that are there to signal the mitochondria to help them understand whether they need to make more or less energy. And so we have this issue with any one of those aspects in 94% of US adults. And there are basically 5 main reasons-ish about the reasons why we have mitochondrial dysfunction. The biggest reason is insulin resistance. So if you have a high blood sugar, you're getting too much glucose to your mitochondria. Glucose is one of the main substrates. It's one of the main things that we need to make energy. We either make energy from glucose or we make energy from ketones. So ketones are fat bodies. They're from fat metabolism. Those are our main ways of bringing energy into the mitochondria.
So for somebody watching this right now, what would be a good way for them to test insulin resistance? Is it fasting blood glucose, HbA1c? Do you look at HOMO2IR? All the above?
All the above, but I think it's 2/3 of US adults have insulin resistance, and the majority of those people do not know they have it. The challenge with our diet, our lifestyle, our stress is that we're in sympathetic, we're in that fight or flight nervous system. Our cortisol level, which is one of our hormones, goes up. And that cortisol level increases our blood sugar. So we need that. Cortisol is very, very important. Your cortisol level rises so that you can wake up. In the end, what's happening is that you're causing the mitochondria to have significant amounts of stress. And as a result of that, they're starting to dysfunction. They're not making as much energy. They're having a hard time detoxing from all the energy that they're making. So you deplete things like antioxidants, things like glutathione and vitamin C, vitamin D, even melatonin actually are prevalent antioxidants in our mitochondria. People don't know that. So the number one reason for mitochondrial dysfunction is insulin resistance. And you have toxins in our environment. You have medications that people take. Common medications like metformin that actually have a destruction capacity on your complex 1 in the mitochondria, which we can talk about. Also have proton pump inhibitors, your omeprazole, Prilosec, Protonix, things like that. And you have infections. Infections also can affect mitochondria in a detrimental way, especially the first 2 complexes of the mitochondria, which are the most important. And then, of course, you have these post-infectious kinds of syndromes. So people that get infections have significant amounts of mitochondrial stress because of the infection, and they can't rebound from it. So your long COVIDs, your chronic EBVs, your chronic mold and chronic Lyme. So the question is, if you have these energy demands, well, how are you going to feel, right? Where do you have your most mitochondria per cell, Boomer? Do you remember?
Heart.
Close. So,
actually, no, it's your testicles.
It's your testicles. Our genital organs, eggs have the most mitochondria per cell. Sperm are very close behind. Making babies is highly energy intensive. The act of itself may be just a couple minutes, but the whole building of it.
You know who it is, right?
Yeah, that's true. We always talk about seconds. My wife and I always talk about, guys are involved for the act, and then, women are involved in growing a baby for 10 months. So it's highly energy intensive, especially the eggs themselves. But behind that is the brain and the heart, the liver, the musculoskeletal tissue. So what do you feel? You feel fertility rates going down dramatically, brain function, anything from brain fog, attention problems, concentration issues, to mental health disorders. depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, there's all an association here with mitochondrial dysfunction. So this is a really common one that I see in my practice where people try to exercise, but they feel like crap for like 3 days later. You have all these various things that are happening inside the mitochondria to make it poorly functioning. But in the end, this is how you're going to feel.
All right, so we've already captured the 5. Let's recap those 5 for everybody. Insulin resistance.
Toxins in our environment. This also includes toxic people and stress as well. So don't forget stress. So stress is a big word. Stress kind of encompasses all of the 5 actually, but significant stress specifically can do it as well. So insulin resistance, toxins in our environment, including toxic people, toxic relationships, medications, infectious and post-infectious syndromes. Those are the main ones that I think about. And so the question is, well, what can we do about it? And that's kind of what we're all about, right?
Yeah, so right now, just in general within the health world, we've had just a deluge of antioxidants, right? And so should everybody just load up on antioxidants? Is there a danger there in going overboard? And then should we also look at some of these technologies out there, and what role does the nervous system play into this?
Yeah, when you look at a lot of studies that have done and looked at a single antioxidant as an intervention, oftentimes it doesn't seem to be at a huge mortality benefit, and sometimes it's actually detrimental in some people. The reason for this is that the system is a network, and an antioxidant is only an antioxidant for a period of time, typically, until it actually might cause stress on the body. And a good example of this one is actually CoQ10. CoQ10 is something that people take a lot. It is actually very well known to be an antioxidant. It also works as a shuttle for electrons on your electron transport chain in your mitochondria. So quick side note on that. So you have 4 complexes on your electron transport chain in your mitochondria that shuttle electrons that come from your food, mostly fat and carbohydrates, into this electron transport chain, and they have to be shuttled from each complex. So what CoQ10 does, it actually shuttles those electrons through complex 1 and complex 2 to complex 3. And so it's a shuttle. It also has this capacity to increase your, what's called your proton and electron gradients, so that you actually can make more energy. It's kind of like a supercharge to your electron transport chain. But if you take too much CoQ10.
I was going to say, should I just load up on the CoQ10, or what are we getting ourselves into?
Exactly. So it actually can have the exact opposite effect. So it's dose dependent, where it's an antioxidant. It actually can combat oxidative stress, but at too high of a dose, it actually has that effect of causing stress on the mitochondria. And you have this paradoxical effect, right? So, and this can also happen with other antioxidants as well. And the other one that we talk about a lot here is glutathione. Glutathione is one of our master antioxidants. And if you take too much of this, it actually can have an effect where it actually decreases your capacity to make glutathione on your own. And then when you have a need for extra glutathione, your body can't make it. So a good example of this is that when we have an infection, what we do is we increase something in our body called hydrogen peroxide. You can get it at the store. Everybody knows it as an antiseptic, but our cells actually make hydrogen peroxide to kill organisms that shouldn't be there. What happens when we do that is the body regulates a system called the NRF1 pathway, where you upregulate the capacity for you to make more glutathione. However, if you don't have this capacity, you're not going to feel very good when you have to increase hydrogen peroxide in the body because of an infection, as another example.
Okay, so we just talked about CoQ10 in detail and why doing ridiculous amounts of CoQ10 might not be a good idea.
Yeah.
And then let's get into some like lifestyle factors for people.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Lifestyle factors that can help us enhance our mitochondrial function. Things like sleep. What role do they play?
When it comes down to it, sleep is not for quitters, everybody.
I remember Nas coming out with that album or the song, New York State of Mind, and he said, sleep is the cousin of death. And I kind of took that to heart for a while.
It's the culture that we have. I mean, what it comes down to is that we do a significant amount of detoxification, especially in our brain when we sleep. We have a lymphatic system in our brain called the glymphatic system. And that system really helps us shuttle out all of that garbage, all of that oxidative stress that I was talking about, made from cellular processes out of our brain and then into our cerebrospinal fluid and then into our lymphatic system. And then we can detoxify it through our liver and through our kidneys. And so sleep is probably the most important way we regulate our capacity to detoxify, especially in our brain. So if you're not getting a lot of sleep, your toxicity is going to go up in the brain and you're going to feel worse over time. More inflammation, more stress. You're also going to deplete hormones over time as well that also get regulated during sleep. And so from a lifestyle perspective, to optimize mitochondrial function, the two things that we always talk about are sleep and stress. Okay. We all have these checklists of things we should be doing every day, but sleep should be the first thing you do every day, not the last.
Most people think of sleep as the last of the day. How do we look at this? And, Dr. Ted has a famous sleep protocol here. How do you explain that to people?
We think of sleep as the last thing we're doing. If we can actually prioritize it as the first thing we do every day, so your day starts when you go to sleep, not when you wake up, that just changes your whole psychology. And this has been a huge transforming thing for me in my life. During my 30s, no problem, but starting to come in my 40s, it's something where I really actually had to start thinking about this. And I wish I had thought about it earlier, to be honest. We have a very significant ability as humans, especially when we're younger, to be able to tolerate a lot of stress, a lot of lack of sleep. But you have a very personal example of how this can actually be a significant detriment with you without actually even knowing about it.
Yeah, so in my 20s and into some of my 30s, I don't know if I had a circadian rhythm. Now, what do I mean by that? I was living in Singapore at the time, and I was traveling a time zone at least once a week, meaning that, at least every week I was in Jakarta, and that's a 1-hour time change. 12 times a year, I was in Europe. That's a 7-hour time change. And then 5 to 7 times a year, I was in the United States. That's a full 12 hours. And I never gave my body a chance to rest. So even though I thought I was doing everything well, I was doing all of the CrossFit, I was following the diets, I was drinking butter coffee like everybody told me to. At the age of 30, I found that circadian dysregulation, and this is very true, we now know a lot more about this, that circadian dysregulation or disrupting that circadian rhythm can be absolutely detrimental to your health. And in my case, I was diagnosed with a cardiovascular issue at the age of 30. And this is despite being, at least on the outside, what society would call healthy.
Yeah, I think it's a really great example of what circadian disruption is going to do. It's caused a significant amount of inflammation in the whole body, and the body's going to respond to that. And it could be responding with cognitive issues. It can respond with cardiovascular issues. It can respond with GI issues. Actually, GI issues are really, really common. I mean, most people I work with now have gastrointestinal issues, and it can be kind of brought back to understanding their sleep and their stress. And the stress piece is a big piece as well, right? Because what Boomer was just describing to you is he was hard charging throughout the day.
Yeah,
CrossFit. You got beat up a couple times as a boxer.
CrossFit. I had my ribs cracked as a boxer. I was training MMA, and I was working in an industry where 80-hour work weeks were pretty common, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, you need a parasympathetic offset.
And that's when you rest, digest, detoxify, and heal. And so the problem is if you're always in the sympathetic overdrive, those neurotransmitters start getting depleted. Like your catecholamines called norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine, or noradrenaline and adrenaline if you're in the UK, I think. And so those start getting depleted, but they put a huge amount of stress on your mitochondria because you're just basically saying, make as much energy as you absolutely can, no matter the consequences, because I need to be on right now. And that right now is for days and weeks and years at a time, except when you just fall dead asleep at night somehow and wake up in the morning and do it all over again. But then what happens is that mitochondria try to respond by shoving out more signals to you to make more energy because they're having a hard time doing it. So it becomes this spiral. And the mitochondria are really where all the common denominators really are for people having dysfunction. How you address it is on various levels, but the stress piece is just so important.
Yeah, and part of that whole circadian regulation, I guess, gets into the idea of light and light's role here.
Yeah.
What about light and exercise as beneficiaries to helping the mitochondria?
Yeah, so regulating your light exposure is extremely important, right? Because there's different types of lights, right? There are, let's call them natural lights and synthetic lights, right? We have natural lights that come from the sunlight. And then we have synthetic lights, which are under cameras, phones, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yes, there's different spectrums within the light. And when you look at white light is all the spectrums of light. You have red light, you have blue light, you have yellow, all the different various colors. Your Roy G. Bivs, right? Red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, green, I forgot green, blue, green, indigo, and violet. There you go.
We're going to get there.
Roy G. Biv. And so every spectrum of the light has different effects on the body. And we need all of these spectrums at different times. The most full spectrum light that you want to get typically is in the morning, because what that does is it resets your circadian rhythm. It resets something called your suprachiasmatic nucleus that's in your brain that comes through your eyes to help you reset and actually decrease the production of something called melatonin. Melatonin is your major and your master regulator of circadian rhythm. And so if you depress it in the morning, it should increase at night. And that's what you want. But if you're having very full spectrum light exposure before you go to bed, you're actually going to decrease your melatonin production. And then again, the other thing I like to remind people is that melatonin does regulate circadian rhythm, but it's also your most powerful antioxidant in your mitochondria. So you're not only making it in the brain and your pineal gland and the calcifications and all those things we can talk about as you get older. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I mean, to some degree it is, and we do make less of it as we get older, but it's such a powerful antioxidant as well. So you want it to go up at night, not only to help regulate your circadian rhythm, but also to help you detoxify while you sleep.
So the 94% of the world having mitochondrial dysfunction increases this thing that we all care about, aging, right? And we talked a little bit about the pineal gland and how that may or may not calcify. We also know that the body over time tends to produce less and less of something like melatonin.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like we have an arena where supplementation becomes an absolute necessity as we get older.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the role here of something like methylene blue.
Yeah.
What role does methylene blue provide in sort of enhancing mitochondrial health?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the context here, as Boomer just mentioned, is that these meat suits, avatars, whatever you want to call them, that we wear, they weren't supposed to be around after about 40 to 45 years of age. We were then old enough to have passed down our genes, and hopefully our children were old enough that they could survive pretty much on their own.
Yeah, and Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene is a very good book.
Yeah, great book. That's a great book, yeah. And so to compensate for that, almost all of us, except if you have like massively awesome genetics, really do need to be supplementing. And the major place where we see dysfunction is in this energy producing capacity in our mitochondria. Because again, making energy is not free, just like the best things in life, right? And so as a result of that, this stress, this rust that happens in the mitochondria over time starts depleting mitochondrial function, and then upstream or downstream, depending on how you're looking at it, everything else can deteriorate from there. So what methylene blue does, which is very novel actually, is that it helps both on the energy production side of the mitochondria and also on the detoxification side, meaning that it enhances energy and also enhance detox. And there's very few compounds out there that can do both. Most things will either enhance energy or they'll enhance detox, like an antioxidant, for example. But there's very few that do both. And the key with methylene blue is that it concentrates in the mitochondria. And it does this amazing capacity at very low doses. We're talking like 4, 8, 16 milligrams of methylene blue, where all of a sudden those complexes that weren't working very well get a little bit of extra support. There's a little bit more NAD around. There's a little bit more FAD, which are the two compounds that bring electrons from our food into the mitochondria. And all of a sudden you can make more of that. All of a sudden that complex 1 or complex 2 that we're deteriorating, we're not functioning well because of infection, because of stress, because of toxin, metformin as well. Metformin actually is a destroyer of complex 1. All of these things are causing a lot of stress in the mitochondria, and then methylene blue can come in and help compensate for that and actually make the electron transport chain more efficient, specifically by optimizing the 4th complex called cytochrome oxidase, and that's complex 4. And so you have this additional efficiency without the suffering of making more energy without additional support. The challenge is, like, if people take lots of caffeine or lots of nicotine or lots of other stimulants, they can have this really bad withdrawal effect, or this effect where they feel terrible come down after having caffeine or nicotine or something like that. And that's because the body couldn't take that extra energy. And then all of a sudden this detox is required, but you don't have enough there to do it. So the beautiful thing about methylene blue is that it's kind of its own category of compound because it has this redox capacity. In fact, we made it a category for it at Troscriptions. We called it a blue tropic in this case. And we have nootropics, which are the brain enhancing supplements. You have ones that are health optimizing, that more support the system. You have performance optimizing, which are ones that more help your brain for a specific task, but are not necessarily healthy. Adderall, caffeine, nicotine, they fall into this category. The latter category, or the former category, I should say, of health optimization nootropics, things like L-tyrosine or CBD are very good ones because they help support the system in various ways. Methylene blue does both. Methylene blue supports the capacity to make energy and also supports the capacity to detox at the same time. So you get a mood boost, you get an energy boost, but you don't have a detrimental effect on the other end.
All right, so we've delved into a lot here today. And so let's wrap things up with a little bit of a summary. We talked about how mitochondria came to be, that marriage between ancient bacteria and our mitochondria. It actually became our modern cells. We also looked at the effects of Well, 94% of the world having mitochondrial dysfunction. What does that look like? Is it aging? Is it insulin resistance? We got into testing for how you might be insulin resistant. And we got into antioxidants, their role, how we might need more of them when we age. And then finally, CoQ10, we dove a little bit into CoQ10. And if there's one phrase that I think people can take away from that, that reverse electron transport function is certainly worth looking into. And then we got into methylene blue and why, as that blue tropic, it's so good for mitochondrial function. Scott, anything left to say?
We spoke about light as well. We talked about stress a lot. I know this is a lot of information, but to start slowly. We really feel like there's lots of ways to approach these. Working with a healthcare practitioner, especially health optimization, medicine or practice practitioner would be really helpful because you can optimize into like diet, lifestyle, but optimize also what are called metabolomic markers, nutrients, cofactors. But take it at your own pace. There's lots of things out there. Just find a foundation, somebody to work with that's going to be really helpful instead of chasing the new supplement or the new antioxidant or the new B vitamin. Or if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave your comments below. We love to read them. We read them all. We'll respond to as many as we can. And we'll catch you next time on Don't Look Up.
Don't look up.